A shattered past, a reclaimed future. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, comment your thoughts. There was no turning back. He left his pregnant mother carrying twins and vanished. 16 years later, he was unmasked on a stage after winning a national beauty pageant. Jason Thorne had always believed success meant sacrifice. At 28, he was already a rising star in the tech world. A blonde, blue-eyed entrepreneur gracing magazine covers and investor panels with the confidence of someone who had never failed. His schedule was packed. His team both feared and admired him, and his ambitions left no room for detours. He lived in penthouses, flew on private jets, and had no patience for sentimentality. Emotions were unpredictable. Love was optional. Family? That was something he'd think about after he'd conquered the world. Marie Anderson didn't fit into Jason's world. She wasn't rich, nor did she crave power. She was soft-spoken, grounded, and earnest, with warm brown hair, bright blue eyes, and a quiet beauty that drew people in, without demanding attention. She had dreams, too, to open her own floral design studio, to live in a house with a garden, to raise her children in a home filled with music and security. When she and Jason started dating, their worlds collided in a way that felt both impossible and magnetic. She softened him. He fascinated her. For a while it worked, beautifully, dangerously, and far too fast. When Marie discovered she was pregnant, she hesitated for days before telling him. It wasn't just the shock, it was the profound fear of how he might react. She rehearsed the words over and over in her head, imagining every possible version of the conversation. Joy, disbelief, anger, panic. But nothing prepared her for the silence that followed when she finally told him. He blinked once, looked at her with that calculating gaze she had once found thrilling, and asked, almost coldly, "Are you keeping it?" Marie's throat closed. "Yes, they're mine. I'm keeping them." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry or argue. He simply rose from the elegant leather sofa in his high-rise apartment. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and put his hands in his pockets. "Then you'll do it without me," he said, as if making a business decision, not a personal one. "My company is about to scale globally. I don't have room for this." "This?" she repeated, stunned. "They're your daughters." "They're your choice," he said, without turning to look at her. "And I've made mine." With that, he walked out of the room. He left her there, alone, hands on her belly, her world collapsing in on itself. Marie didn't beg him to stay. She didn't try to guilt him or chase after him. Instead, she gathered her things that very night and left the apartment for good. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't cry. There was just a heavy stillness in her chest, as if part of her had already known this moment would come. Jason Thorne had always made it clear. Business first. He had loved her in his own way, but not more than the idea of an empire. He left the city within a week. Using the last of her savings, she moved to a tiny one-bedroom house in a quiet coastal town where her grandmother had lived. There were no staff, no skyline of skyscrapers, no money, but there was peace. She sold her car to cover medical expenses and took a job as a seamstress in a local tailor shop. At night, she freelanced, sewing dresses from home and mending clothes for neighbors. Her belly grew. Her hands stayed busy. Her heart stayed quiet. Ultrasounds revealed she was having twins. Girls. Identical. She laughed through tears when she heard it. 2 of them. Double the fear, double the beauty, double the love. She started sewing 2 of everything. 2 blankets, 2 tiny dresses, 2 soft hats. She talked to them at night when she couldn't sleep. She told them they were already loved, Already enough. Already whole. They would never have to wonder if they were wanted. Jason never called. Not once. No texts, no emails, no second thoughts. He had vanished into his corporate world and never looked back. Marie stopped waiting for him to. The night the twins were born was one of those nights etched into memory, not for drama or panic, but for the quiet weight of it all. The small coastal hospital was clean, with a faint fluorescent hum in the hallways. Rain beat steadily against the windows, and the smell of antiseptic mingled with the ocean breeze that seeped through poorly sealed window frames. Marie was alone. No one paced the hallway. No excited family in the waiting room. No hand to grip through contractions. Just a nurse named Dana, who watched her intently through each wave of pain, and a young doctor who seemed surprised by her quiet strength. Labor was long and slow, but Marie barely made a sound. She had cried her tears but months ago. This was the part she had prepared for, the part she had chosen. And when it was finally over, when the air suddenly filled with the sharp, twin cries of two teeny, breathing lives, she closed her eyes and released the first real breath she'd taken in what felt like years. They were placed on her chest seconds apart, two warm, fragile bundles, with impossibly small hands and the same delicate, pale eyelashes. Both had wisps of blonde hair, already light and soft like dandelion fluff, and when their eyes opened, she gasped. Two pairs of blue eyes. Her blue eyes. Not his. She named them Emma and Lily. Emma, the quieter of the two, rested easily against her chest, while Lily, a little smaller, cried with a strength that made the nurses raise their eyebrows and smile. Marie held them both, whispering their names over and over like a spell. She had never known such immediate, overwhelming love. They were hers, entirely, and she knew in that moment she would do whatever it took to give them a life they could be proud of. The first few days were harder than she had imagined. Sleep came in fragments, bottles, diapers, fever scares, midnight walks across creaking floorboards. She lived in a one-bedroom rental where the kitchen doubled as a laundry room, and the baby's bassinet was inches from her bed. There were nights she sat on the edge of the mattress, both girls crying in harmony, her arms aching and her eyelids heavy, and closed her eyes for just a second and wondered if she could keep going. But she always did. She returned to work 6 weeks postpartum, taking shift at the tailor shop by day, while a kind neighbor watched the twins. At night, she sewed until her fingers stiffened. She often fell asleep at the machine, waking with thread tangled in her hair. But bills needed paying, and formula wasn't free. Her body healed slowly, but her will grew stronger. Every coin counted. Every decision mattered. She had no one to rely on but herself, and the two tiny souls who lit up every time she walked into the room. The girls grew fast. At 2 years old, Emma had an observant quietness, a watchful, almost protective nature, while Lily was expressive, dramatic, and endlessly curious. They spoke in short phrases only Marie could understand. They shared everything, from pacifiers to secrets, and had a bond that made strangers smile. The townspeople began to recognize them, the Sunshine Twins, as one old woman at the bakery called them. Their beauty was impossible to miss. Bright blue eyes that mirrored the sea, perfect smiles, and golden hair that curled at the ends as if they'd stepped out of a storybook. Marie, though perpetually exhausted, found deep peace in their small routines. Mornings were slow and filled with cereal and cartoons. Afternoons meant walks to the park, picking daisies and pebbles. Evenings were a chaos of bath time and lullabies, whispered stories about stardust and strong girls who saved themselves. On the rare nights, both girls fell asleep early, and the house was quiet. Marie would sit by the window with a cup of tea and watch the streetlights flicker on one by one. She often wondered about Jason, not with longing, but with curiosity. Did he ever wonder what they looked like? Did he ever feel the emptiness where a family could have been? She never mentioned his name to the girls, not out of bitterness, but out of protection. He had made his choice. They didn't need to carry his absence as a burden. Instead, she filled their world with warmth, discipline, affection, and structure. They grew up knowing they were loved beyond measure, even if the world outside their small home was unpredictable. When Emma once asked why they didn't have a daddy like her preschool friend, Marie had smiled softly and told her, "Because we're lucky enough to have each other, and that's more than enough." She meant it. Years passed, and the girls thrived. Marie stretched every dollar, hunted for bargains, and haggled when she had to. She never bought anything for herself unless absolutely necessary. But Emma and Lily had books, art supplies, clean clothes, and always, always a home that felt safe. She attended every recital, parents' night, and doctor's appointment. She clapped the loudest at every school event. Her life revolved around them, not with resentment, but with pride. They were her miracle, and no part of her wished for a different life, only a future where they would never have to doubt their worth, as she once did. By the time Emma and Lily turned 16, the small town that had once been their entire universe had begun to feel a little too cramped for their growing ambitions. Their days were filled with school, part-time jobs, and late-night talks on their bedroom floor about the world beyond the coast. The girls had grown into reflections of each other, with the same golden hair, the same piercing blue eyes, but their personalities had begun to branch in opposing directions. Emma was the quiet force, serene, deeply thoughtful, always 2 steps ahead in every situation. She spoke softly, but with confidence, and had a way of commanding attention without trying. Lily, on the other hand, was fiery and expressive, the kind of girl who befriended waitresses. She argued passionately in debate club and laughed the loudest in every room. Together, they were magnetic, inseparable, and perfectly balanced. Their beauty, which had once been a casual compliment from neighbors, had now become undeniable. Strangers stopped them on the street. Boutique owners asked if they modeled. At school, teachers and students alike noticed. But it wasn't just how they looked. It was how they moved through the world. There was a presence about them, something that couldn't be taught. Something earned. It was Lily who first suggested entering a local beauty and talent pageant held every spring. It wasn't about vanity. It was about visibility. The winner would receive a scholarship to a summer leadership program, plus a ticket to the national finals in Los Angeles. Emma hesitated at first. The idea of being judged on appearance made her uncomfortable, even though the competition also included interviews, community service, and academic records. But Marie, who had long ago learned to trust her daughter's instincts, didn't dismiss it. Instead, she asked, "Why do you want to do this?" And Lily replied without hesitation, "Because we have something to say, and maybe someone important needs to hear it." Preparation lasted weeks. They had to juggle school and rehearsals. They built their own presentation boards for the advocacy segment and practiced answering impromptu questions about leadership, integrity, and vision. Marie couldn't afford a coach, so she became one, sitting in the living room with flashcards, reviewing posture and tone, helping them sew dresses when second-hand ones didn't quite fit. They laughed a lot during those nights, but there was also a growing sense of seriousness. This was more than a pageant. It was a platform. The night of the regional competition, the auditorium was packed. Parents, students, and local news crews filled the seats, and Emma and Lily, in matching navy blue dresses and confident smiles, waited backstage for their moment. Marie sat in the front row, heart pounding, hands clasped in her lap. She didn't care if they won. She just wanted them to feel proud. When they walked onto the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. Lights reflected in their hair, and for a moment, the audience seemed to forget how to breathe. They introduced themselves, not as identical twins, but as individuals with a shared strength. Lily spoke first, fiery and brilliant, about the importance of women uplifting each other. Emma followed with quiet eloquence about resilience, about growing up without a father teaching them to lead themselves. The judges were stunned, not just by the beauty, but by the substance. In the talent segment, Lily performed a dramatic monologue, while Emma played original piano music she had composed. In the advocacy round, they shared a joint presentation on fostering confidence in girls in underserved communities. Their sincerity was unmistakable. When the winners were announced, the auditorium erupted. Emma and Lily stood under the spotlight, hands clasped tightly, eyes wide with disbelief. Metal sashes were placed around their necks, and the announcer's voice boomed as confetti rained down like snow. They had done it. Not just one, but they had claimed their voices in front of an audience that would never forget them. After the event, while in the dressing room, wiping off makeup and laughing about silly moments backstage, a representative from the national pageant approached them. She was polished, older, with sharp eyes and a warm smile. She handed them a business card and said, "We'd like to fast-track your path to the national finals in Los Angeles. You are exactly what this generation needs to see." The trip to Los Angeles wasn't something they could afford, but word of their victory spread quickly through the town. Within days, their school had started a fundraiser, and donations poured in. Marie, overwhelmed and deeply touched, believed in possibility again. The girls would go, stand on a national stage, and no matter what, they would have already won. Before they left, Emma asked Marie one night, as they folded clothes into suitcases together, "Do you think he'll be watching?" She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. Marie hesitated. Then she said, "I don't know, but if he does, he'll see exactly what he missed." Emma didn't ask again. They packed, boarded the plane, and took their first steps into the world that had once felt so far away. What they didn't know, what none of them could have known, was that someone was watching, and that their moment on that stage would be far more than a performance. It would be a reckoning. The ballroom at the Grand Regal Hotel in Los Angeles shimmered with elegance and nerves. It was the kind of place where success clung to every surface. Gold-trimmed walls, crystal chandeliers, velvet-covered chairs, and tables draped in fine linens, with place cards bearing titles like CEO, investor, and media executive. It wasn't the kind of place Emma and Lily had ever imagined themselves standing. But there they were, two 16-year-old girls from a quiet coastal town, preparing to walk onto the biggest stage of their lives. The national pageant finals weren't just about beauty. It was an event that celebrated leadership, intelligence, creativity, and presence. Girls from across the country had arrived with carefully selected wardrobes, professional coaches, and parents who had been grooming them for this since preschool. Emma and Lily had none of that. What they had was each other, their mother's unconditional belief in them, and a strength born not of privilege, but of persistence. They didn't wear designer gowns or move with rehearsed perfection. They wore confidence sewn into every step and a purpose behind every word they would say. Meanwhile, In a private VIP section just above the ballroom, Jason Thorne adjusted the cufflinks on his tailored suit and surveyed the room with mild disinterest. He had been invited to judge the final round of the competition as a symbolic gesture. His company had recently launched a grant initiative for young women in entrepreneurship, and his name carried enough weight to attract press. For him, it was just another formal event, another exercise in image and diplomacy. He hadn't read the contestants' bios. He never did. He'd show up, offer a few polished observations, smile for the cameras, and disappear back into his controlled, efficient world. When the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, drawing the audience's attention, Jason took his seat. He glanced at the program briefly, flipping through pages filled with photos and mission statements. One page caught his eye, not because he recognized anyone, but because of the photograph. Two blonde girls standing side by side, both with striking blue eyes, in matching navy dresses, holding hands. They looked familiar, uncomfortably familiar. Their names were Emma and Lily Anderson. Anderson. His heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be. He leaned forward slightly, skimming the brief biography printed below the photo. Raised by a single mother, advocates for youth empowerment, strong academic background. Grew up in a coastal town. No mention of a father. His throat closed. The music began, and the girls walked onto the stage. The lights reflected in their golden hair. Their eyes shone under the glare, and as they began to speak, one after the other, seamless and confident, Jason's entire world swayed. Every syllable hit him like a memory he'd buried too deep. The curve of their jaws, the way one smiled with restraint, and the other lit up the entire stage. The cadence of their voices. His mind reeled back 16 years to a living room where a woman with warm eyes and a trembling voice had told him she was pregnant, to a moment when he had chosen silence over responsibility. Jason remained frozen. The entire ballroom applauded around him, but he couldn't move. And then it happened. At the end of their presentation, Lily looked out at the audience, her voice suddenly softer, almost trembling with emotion, and said, "We dedicate this moment to the woman who never gave up on us, and to the man who walked away. If you're watching, we hope you finally see what you left behind." Emma took her hand and added, "Dad, do we matter to you now?" The audience gasped. Some thought it was theatrical. Some thought it was scripted. But Jason knew better than anyone. There was no script, only the truth. His stomach churned. The lights dimmed, and the crowd erupted in applause, oblivious to the man in the judge's box, sitting pale and stunned, hands clasped in his lap, breathing shallowly. He had come in thinking this was just another obligation. Instead, he had come face to face with the past he had tried so hard to erase. His daughters, his own flesh and blood, were standing on that stage, and they had called him out before he had even fully realized who they were. He couldn't tear his gaze away. Every instinct in him screamed to run, to leave, to avoid the shame and the questions. But something deeper held him there. The sheer force of the moment pinned him. He had missed everything. Their first words, their first steps, their first heartbreaks. And now they stood, self-possessed without him, asking for nothing except to be seen. And they had asked the question he had never been brave enough to ask himself. Do I matter to them? And more painfully, do they still matter to me? The answer surged through him like a wave too heavy to contain. Yes, more than anything. And he had no idea what he could do to fix it. Please subscribe to our channel. Like this video if you believe in second chances. Jason didn't sleep that night. After the gala ended, he slipped away quietly, avoiding the crowd, the press, the after-event cocktails, and the congratulatory remarks from sponsors who had no idea the show had ended his ability to breathe properly. He walked the city like a disoriented man, as if Los Angeles had become unrecognizable to him in just a few hours. Everything he thought he knew about his life, everything he had convinced himself he had done for the right reasons, collapsed under the weight of what he had seen on that stage. Back in his hotel suite, he stood for hours by the window, staring at the glittering skyline. He didn't touch the drink someone had left for him. He didn't check his phone. He replayed the moment, those words, that voice, their eyes, as if he were watching a scene from someone else's life. But it wasn't someone else's. It was his. They were his daughters. There was no doubt. Every instinct, every memory of Marie's eyes, her strength, the way she had once looked at him when she said, "You'll regret this," echoed in the faces of the girls who had just taken a national stage and stolen the breath from everyone in the room. He wondered how it had come to this, how he could have missed 16 years of their lives. He had known about the pregnancy. He remembered that moment clearly. Marie had stood in his apartment, nervous and brave, hands on her belly, her voice trembling but firm. He had disconnected. He had chosen business, expansion, control. He had told himself at the time that she was strong, that she would be fine, and that if the child truly was his, perhaps one day he would make it right. But one day never came. He buried the guilt. He worked harder. He dated other people, but never let anyone get close. He built his company into a giant, because conquering the world was easier than facing what he had left behind. And now, suddenly, he was confronted with the reality of that decision. It was no longer an abstract thing. It had names. Emma. Lily. They were no longer babies he could pretend didn't exist. They were powerful, articulate young women who had built lives without him, and then looked him in the eye and asked him if they mattered. The shame was unbearable. By morning, Jason sat at the desk in his room, paper and pen in front of him. He hadn't written a letter by hand in years, but typing felt wrong. It felt too polished, too safe. This needed to be raw. He started slowly, uncertain at first, but the words began to flow. He told Marie the truth, that he had been afraid, that he had been selfish, that he had buried his emotions in his work because it gave him something he could control. He wrote that he had never stopped thinking about her. Not really. And that he had wondered so many times over the years what kind of mother she had become, what kind of girls she had raised. He told her he saw now what she had done, what she had sacrificed, and that she had given his daughters something he never could: the strength to stand tall in a world that often tries to silence girls like them. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He knew he didn't deserve it. But he asked for a chance, a single chance to talk, to look his daughters in the eye and tell them they were never forgettable. That even if he failed every test of fatherhood, he could at least try to be honest now. He left the letter at the hotel reception, addressed to Marie, who he knew was staying just a few floors below. He didn't expect a reply. In fact, he expected her to tear it up and never speak to him again. But a part of him had to try. He couldn't let that ballroom echo in his chest for the rest of his life without building a bridge somehow. He heard nothing for a full day. Then, that night, as the sun set behind the city, he received a text message from an unknown number. It was short and direct. "We received your letter. Do not call. Do not visit. But we will let the girls decide." Jason stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't final either. It was a door, just slightly ajar. A chance, however fragile, to face what he had run from. It was more than he expected, more than he deserved. That night he sat on the edge of his bed, exhausted, but strangely at peace. For the first time in 16 years, he wasn't running. And for the first time he allowed himself to hope, not for redemption, but for the beginning of something real, something honest, something that might, one day, become love. The message arrived late at night, and when Emma saw the name on the screen, Jason Thorne, her chest tightened in a way she wasn't prepared for. She had stared at it for several minutes, not touching it, not opening it, just watching the name glow on her phone, like something radioactive. Lily was in the room, lying on the bed, reading a magazine article about their national pageant win, her mood still buzzing from the adrenaline of it all. Emma didn't speak immediately. She just handed Lily the phone and waited. Lily sat up slowly after reading. She looked at her sister, serious now, and asked, "Do you want to reply?" Emma didn't know. She wasn't angry. She thought she would be. But the overwhelming emotion wasn't rage. It was something more complicated, like sadness mixed with curiosity and fear. It was easier when he was just a name from a story, the faceless man who left their mother behind. But now he had a voice, a face, a confession. And even if she didn't want to admit it, his letter had left a mark. Marie hadn't said much after reading it. She had passed it to them the day before, carefully folded, her eyes heavy with caution. "You should read this," she had said simply. "Then we'll talk." So they read it. Twice, then 3 times. Jason's letter was filled with guilt, but not manipulation. He hadn't begged. He hadn't blamed. He had told them the truth, even when it made him look bad. That, more than anything, made it hard to ignore. It was the first time anyone had acknowledged the empty space where a father should have been. The next day, Emma sent him a message. She kept it brief. "We received your letter. We're thinking. No promises." A minute later, she added, "We will meet you once, just to talk." She hit send before she could change her mind. Marie hesitated, but didn't stop them. She had spent 16 years protecting them from the fallout of one man's failure, and now that he had appeared, apologizing, trembling, but present, she knew the decision had to be theirs. She warned them gently. "This doesn't have to be anything more than a conversation. You owe him nothing." But she also admitted something she hadn't said aloud before. If he truly wants to make things right, even just a little, perhaps you deserve to hear him say it to your face. The meeting was arranged at a small cafe, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. They chose the location. Neutral. Safe. Public. Lily wore a smart blazer her friend had lent her, chin lifted as if it were armor. Emma wore something simple, classic, her hair pulled back tightly as if to hide the nervousness she couldn't entirely suppress. They arrived together, as always, side by side, their bond unspoken but iron strong. When they saw him through the cafe window, already seated, no assistant, no suit, just a man in a gray sweater with his hands nervously clasped, they paused at the door. "This changes nothing," Emma whispered. "Only if we let it," Lily replied. They walked in. Jason stood immediately, unsure whether to smile or remain solemn. He looked older than they remembered from the stage, tired, but genuine. He didn't try to hug them, didn't offer his hand. He just said, "Thank you for coming." For several seconds, no one said anything. Then Lily sat. Emma followed. The silence was thick, but not hostile, just filled with everything that had never been said. Jason took a deep breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he began. "I don't deserve it. I made a mistake, a massive one, and I spent too many years convincing myself I couldn't fix it, that it would be better if I stayed away. that I didn't know how to be the father you needed. But now I know that silence protected no one. It only made the absence louder. Emma watched him closely. She wasn't looking for excuses. She was looking for cracks. The truth. She found it in the tremor of his voice, in the way he never broke eye contact, even as his hands fidgeted under the table. Lily cocked her head, more skeptical. You say you regret it. So what now? You want to make up for 16 years in a few coffee meetings? No, he said immediately. I can't, and I won't pretend I can. But I want to start with this moment, if you'll let me. Just one. Then the next, and maybe another. They talked for almost an hour. It wasn't easy. The questions came fast. Some painful. Some raw. Why didn't you call? Did you ever wonder what we were like? Were you even a little proud from afar? Jason answered each one, even when the answers laid him bare. And when Emma finally asked, "Did you ever love our mother?" he paused for a long time before replying. "Yes," he said quietly. "I just didn't know how to be a man worthy of that love. And by the time I realized it, I thought it was too late." When they left the cafe, no one cried. There were no hugs, no long goodbyes. But there was a shift. Something had been acknowledged. A door opened, not wide, but a crack, just enough for air to pass through. That night, back at the hotel, Lily said, "I still don't trust him." Emma nodded. "Me neither, but I didn't hate him either." Emma smiled faintly. "No, and that's what scares me." They didn't tell Marie everything. Just enough. "He showed up," Emma said, "and he didn't lie." Marie listened, her expression unreadable. Then, softly, she whispered, "That's more than he did before." And for the first time in their lives, the idea of having a father didn't feel like a fairy tale or a betrayal. It felt like a possibility, uncertain, without promises, but real. In the weeks that followed their first meeting, Emma and Lily found themselves thinking about Jason more than they expected. At first, it was easy to pretend nothing had changed. They went back to school, fielded questions from classmates about the pageant, and helped Marie rearrange the living room, which had become a sanctuary of articles, photos, and congratulatory notes from friends, family, and strangers alike. But underneath the normal rhythm of their days, something had shifted. Their father's presence, once an empty space, now a breathing reality, cast a quiet shadow over everything. Jason didn't push. He didn't flood their phones with texts or try to force his way into their lives. Instead, he did the opposite. He gave them space. Every few days, he would send a message, never more than a few sentences. Sometimes it was a link to a book he thought they'd like, or a video of a young woman giving a TED Talk that reminded him of them. Other times it was simply, "Thinking of you? Hope school is going well." The restraint was unexpected. It made Emma wonder if he truly understood how much damage had been done. Lily, true to herself, remained guarded. She read every message, but didn't always reply. She watched him closely when they met, because, to their surprise, they agreed to meet again. The second time was less formal, at a bookstore cafe near campus. Then a third, at a quiet botanical garden Emma had always loved. Each meeting peeled back a little more of the wall between them. Jason listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, he wasn't apologizing or trying to claim a title he'd long abandoned. He asked about their lives, what they loved, what scared them, what they dreamed of becoming. Marie kept her distance. She didn't ask for updates, though they knew she wanted to. Sometimes she would look up when they came home, searching their faces for something unsaid. When Lily finally told her about the third meeting, Marie just nodded and said, "Just don't let him rewrite the story." It wasn't bitterness in her voice. It was protection. Emma started to notice the way Jason looked at them, not with guilt, but with a kind of reverence, as if he couldn't believe they existed, and even more, that they were willing to sit across from him. He told them stories about his childhood, about the things he got wrong in life, about how success had often been a shield he used to avoid looking in the mirror. He spoke once carefully about the day Marie had told him she was pregnant. He didn't try to excuse what he did. He just said, "I didn't know how to be anything but what I thought the world expected of me. But what I needed to be was yours." One afternoon, after meeting Jason for lunch, the girls returned home to find an envelope on the kitchen table. It was unmarked. Inside were copies of 2 college tuition deposit letters, paid in full. No signature, no letter. Just the confirmation. Emma's was for Stanford, Lily's for NYU. They stared at it for a long time before speaking. "He did this," Lily said. Emma nodded. "Without telling us." Marie walked into this kitchen moments later. Her eyes landed on the papers, and she froze. Then she sat down, quietly, as if trying to steady herself. "He wanted to help," Emma said. She said nothing. Simply, "He did." For the first time in a long time, Marie looked unsure. She rubbed her temples, then looked at them in the eye. "I don't know how to feel about this. He had no right to disappear. But I won't lie. This changes things, for both of you." Later that night, Emma found a voicemail from Jason. He sounded hesitant, as if he had debated sending it. "I know I can't buy my way back into your lives," he said. "That's not what this was. I just wanted to give something without asking for anything in return. If you decide not to speak to me again, I'll be glad I helped. I just wanted to give you the opportunities I once wasted." Emma didn't cry, but she lay awake for a long time that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a person could be so profoundly flawed, and yet try so hard to be better. Lily surprised her the next day, suggesting something neither of them had dared to mention before. "What if we invite him to the awards banquet?" she asked. Emma looked up from her laptop, confused. "The school one?" "Yeah, it's not huge, but it's still something. He doesn't have to speak. Just be there." Emma hesitated. "Are you ready for that?" "I don't know," Lily admitted. "But maybe he needs to see what it looks like when you show up, quietly, without credit." They didn't tell Marie immediately. They wanted it to be their decision. A moment they could offer, not out of pity or obligation, but out of control. So they sent Jason a short message. "Banquet, Friday night, 7 p.m., no tie required." His reply came almost instantly. "Wouldn't miss it." Friday arrived, and the girls were at the school auditorium, surrounded by classmates and teachers and community members. Their names were called for academic excellence, leadership, and service. When they looked at the crowd, they saw him, Jason, standing in the back, alone. He didn't wave. He didn't try to draw attention. He just stood there, watching, applauding, tears silently gathering in his eyes. And in that moment, something in both of them shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the understanding that some absences can, piece by piece, be rewritten by presence. That sometimes the greatest apology isn't spoken, it's shown, and that healing doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it comes like a father, standing quietly in the back of an auditorium, finally learning to stay. The day of the National Scholarship Gala arrived with the kind of surreal anticipation that made the air feel electric. It was held in Washington, D.C., in a grand hall with marble columns and chandeliers, the kind of place that felt designed for people with famous last names and historical legacies. Emma and Lily had been invited, as two of the year's youngest honorees, recognized not just for their academic achievements, but for their advocacy, leadership, and public speaking following the national pageant. In the months since, their story had traveled quietly. Two sisters raised by a single mother, speaking truth on a stage where silence had once reigned. The world had listened. Jason flew separately at the girls' invitation. They had agreed he could attend, not as a guest of honor, not sitting beside them, but somewhere in the audience. They were still learning to trust him, still navigating the fragile thread between memory and possibility. But he had shown up consistently, never demanding, never late, always present in quiet ways that mattered. He had attended Emma's science fair, Lily's debate finals, and he had even brought Marie a rare flower from a grower in Oregon when he discovered she once dreamed of opening her own flower shop. He never mentioned the gesture again. He left it on her doorstep with a note. "I remember more than you think. I regret what I chose. I want to honor what you built." The girls had begun, slowly, to believe that his presence wasn't a performance. It was an effort, and that, in itself, meant more than words ever could. The gala was elegant and formal, but Emma and Lily walked into it as women who had earned every step. They wore dresses custom-made by Marie herself, modern, simple, stunning, and they styled their hair in ways that echoed each other, without being identical. They no longer needed to be the same to be connected. Their bond was in every glance, in every breath they took before stepping onto a stage. They were no longer the twins who surprised a millionaire father. They were leaders in their own right. As the night unfolded, the girls listened to speeches from senators, philanthropists, and educators. But the final moment of the night belonged to them. The presenters walked to the podium and began their introduction. Our closing remarks tonight will be delivered by two young women who have reminded us all what courage, resilience, and truth sound like. Emma and Lily Anderson. The spotlight followed them as they walked to the stage, heels softly clicking on the polished floor. The applause grew as they took their place behind the microphone. Jason, seated near the back of the room, rose with the rest of the crowd, but his hands trembled slightly. He wasn't sure what they were going to say. He hadn't asked. He didn't want to know beforehand. He believed in letting them speak freely, even if what they said was painful. Lily began. Her voice, as always, was confident, clear. "When we were younger, we used to ask our mother if we were missing something, if not having a father meant we were somehow incomplete, and every time she would say the same thing. You are missing nothing, because you already have everything." The room went silent. Emma stepped forward. "But the truth is, we were missing something. We were missing being known by the person who helped create us. We were missing seeing someone try for us, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And we've learned something important this year. Absence doesn't have to be permanent." They looked at each other, then out at the audience. Lily spoke again. "We are not the product of abandonment. We are the result of a mother's resilience, and we are proof that people can change if they choose to show up." Emma added softly. "Our father didn't raise us, but now he shows up, quietly, with humility, and sometimes that's the loudest kind of love." The applause was deafening. Jason remained seated, tears silently rolling down his face, hidden in the shadows of the hall. He didn't want recognition. He had received something better. Acknowledgement. A space in their story, no longer defined by failure, but by redemption earned one day at a time. After the gala, the girls found him waiting just outside the hall, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than the world had ever allowed him to appear. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. Lily leaned on his shoulder. Emma took his hand. Marie appeared moments later, dressed in a simple black dress she had altered herself. Her eyes met Jason's for the first time in weeks. She nodded. Not cold, not warm, simply honest. "Thank you," she said. "Not for the past, but for now." Jason nodded in turn. "You raised them to be everything I wasn't, and everything I wish I'd been." She smiled then. "Just a little. You still have time." As the four of them walked out into the night, the city glowed around them. There were still wounds. There would always be missing pieces, unspoken regrets. What if? That they could never answer. But now there was also space. For presence. For growth. For second chances that weren't perfect, but were real. Sometimes, family isn't built at the beginning. Sometimes, it's chosen at the end, and carried forward. Together. Comment your thoughts on this powerful story. What does family mean to you?